Welcome to Fractional Futures, the essential podcast for CEOs, investors, and senior marketing executives looking to unlock the power of fractional marketing leadership. I'm Paul Mills, your guide on this journey, where me and my special guests uncover how this innovative leadership model is reshaping the business landscape. Whether you're a business leader looking to build a competitive advantage, an investor seeking to enhance the value of your portfolio, or a senior marketing executive considering a fractional career, this podcast is for you. We'll share expert insights, provide actionable strategies, and explore real-world success stories to help you leverage fractional marketing leadership for maximum impact. Tune into Fractional Futures and discover how to revolutionize your business and career. Hi, our guest today is Dan Gwalter, an executive coach and founder of No Nonsense Leadership. Dan's been supporting me on the previous podcasts, and I'm very much delighted that he's here today. Thank you, Dan, for joining us.
Hi, Dan. Ready for another episode?
Absolutely, yeah, we're banging them out now. So in our last episode, we spoke about the importance for marketers on reshaping their professional experiences into a compelling story that highlights the transition to fractional leadership and also the value they offer. In this episode, we'll be exploring how marketers need to package their professional expertise into what we call a diagnostic tool that attracts high-value clients. So, Dan, this is something that I had to do when I sort of switched into a fractional role. But do you want to sort of explain to our listeners really what we mean by diagnostic offer, why we need to have something like this, and why they attract a high-value client?
Let's start at the very, very beginning. When you transition out of home world, the biggest mindset shift is you are not an employee. You're not going to market and saying, hey, this is my job title, hire me for X. That's not how fractional work actually happens. If we accept that fractional work is about providing a solution to a problem that a client has, then the way that we package ourselves has to be completely different. Now, one of the biggest problems, I'm not going to say in states, one of the biggest problems I see with new fractionals is that they're still retaining that legacy mindset of, I need to earn X amount per annum. And so when they first come into the fractional marketplace, immediately start to try and chase those clients. I want a client that's going to hire me for less, we'll pick a mid-team, say £150,000 a year. And the problem is, well, it's quite an obvious problem, right? On day one, nobody knows who you are. And because of that, nobody likes you and nobody trusts you. And therefore, trying to sell £150,000 worth of services has a very low likelihood of success. So how do we go to market? I guess the easy answer is to go at the very beginning and think about your funnel. If we think about that attraction, nurturing, and conversion sort of linear funnel that we've all grown up with, when you come into the fractional world, you actually end up with multiple interconnected funnels. And so the way that I do it, and I know Paul were exactly the same, and a lot of other guys have done the same, start off with a smaller product. You're trying to create something that is perceived to be lower risk, has a fixed cost and a fixed set of outcomes that enables you to work with clients, demonstrate credibility and authority in your domain, whilst building that all-important trust. So if I look from my landscape, things like audits, health checks, those types of discovery-based products, they can very easily be sold for £25,000 for 4 days worth of effort. For the client, they know what they're getting, so it's fixed outcome. They know what it's going to cost, so it's fixed cost, which means it has a very low risk profile. For the fractional consultant, what it means is that they're in the door. To deliver that product, to execute it, you're going to have to talk to the CEO, you're going to have to talk to the board, you have to start to share experience and give value. And at the end of that, the output is quite obviously a report that says you're here and you want to get there. The route to that is this. And by the way, if you wanted me to execute execute that for you. Not execute you, that would be a bad thing. If you wanted me to execute that plan, then it would look like this and cost X. And then you execute. I thought I might. So the diagnostic product
That's good.
really is a route to market, and it feeds your high ticket funnel. Does that make sense to you, Paul? I think it probably does, because I know you do something fairly similar.
It makes perfect sense. And I think, when I was transitioning into the fractional CMO role, it was very obvious that I needed that, I guess, low cost but high value thing, diagnostic tool that someone can take part in. And for me, it was like a health check, a marketing capability. So spend 10 minutes filling out some questions. You'll get a report automated at the end that gives you a score. And if that score's low, I can help you make that score get higher. And it's only taken someone 10 minutes. They can kind of see the value that process offers. And they get not an interview, a workshop at the end of the process to say, you may not be ready to buy me, but let's discuss those results and see where we land. So for someone who's probably been in the marketing role, I guess a marketer would be naturally quite good at developing products. They should be familiar with the ideation process. But what sort of tools are out there to create these diagnostics, and are there different types of diagnostic tools that you can build?
So there are two different types of diagnostic. There is the free of charge, very quick to execute diagnostic, and then there is the pay for diagnostic that is slightly more complex. And I genuinely today, I recommend that most people do both, because the sums of money that are involved in that high ticket retained service, if you're thinking about becoming a retained CNO for an organization, then you are asking for a big investment. And so you have to accept that people are going to go free, low ticket, high ticket. And at the time, across the bottom there, it could be 6 months before you get to that high ticket offer. So what you don't want to do is cut out any revenue generating opportunity and find yourself hitting bankruptcy before your first client signs. That would be the worst case scenario. Now, if I look at the free options, things that work really, really well, and we can call them what we like, they are lead magnets, nothing else. White papers, buys, anything that's got an email exchange. I'm going to give you some value in this document. You're going to give me your email address, and yes, I'm going to market to you as a result of that. They work incredibly well because they're there 24/7. They're downloadable. People digest them at their own pace. And then maybe after a week after somebody's downloaded them, reach out to them and get their feedback. Start that conversation and go through that, that regime of getting to know them and genuinely trying to understand the problems they're facing. And the reality is, if somebody downloaded it, they only downloaded it for one of two reasons. Either they are genuine and they have problems and you may be able to help, or they're just really intrigued to see what you're giving away free of charge, and at which point you can qualify those out. The second type of those, still free to deliver are the quizzes, score apps, KPI cards, those types of things. The only one I actually use these days is a product called Score App. Because it is incredibly easy to use and it can turn out high quality outputs at a ridiculous rate. So if you were doing a health check, you would define the question sets into categories. So maybe it's 3 or 4 questions per category, just either yes, no's or scale based 1 to 10 type questions, and then you would create some formulaic logic to score that category's result. And then you would write your results page for low scoring category up to high scoring category. So from a client perspective, that just feels like answering a questionnaire and getting an automated report out back of it. The reason I love those is that I get so much information out the back of that. For everybody that fills those out, I can see how long they spend per question set, so I know how much I'm thinking about it. I can see their high and low scores, their strengths and weaknesses, and I can tailor my outbound messaging as a result. Hey, I saw you filled out a score app. can have a notice that you score relatively weakly in this particular section. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to have a chat and share some insights as to how you can strengthen that. They generally work. But what I do so that's the free option. What I do find is that they flow very nicely into the paid for option. Now, if you can get a conversation or a meeting out of here, in that conversation meeting, you're listening to genuine problems, you're forming opinions. Traditionally, the design outcome is that the client wants some form of proposal for remediation. How do we get better? How do we get to this outcome? And your answer more often than not is going to be, I need some time on the ground. It's still a number of days, 2 to 3 days for a small organization, up to probably 10 days for a large organization. But that activity is you working with an executive team, working with various business units, understanding the actual mechanics of what's going on and what the real blockers are that stop them achieving their goals, and then producing some form of compelling output report that says this is how you get there and this is your plan. And that plan really is your pitch for your high ticket offer. So if to wrap that segment up, if you think about it, you've actually got 3 sales funnels. You've got a low ticket sales funnel, which is free. You've got a mid ticket sales funnel, which is sub 25 grand. And you've got a high ticket sales funnel, which is your 150 plus. They all feed and they all work together, and you have to manage all of them.
I know in the previous episode we spoke about the ideal client profile. Do you need specific diagnostic tools for each of your ICPs, or if you've just focused on one ICP, presumably you just have 1, 2, or 3, the low, medium, and high ticket diagnostics? What would you suggest for someone who's probably got 2 core audiences? It might be referrers of businesses, and it might be direct. They might be directly working with CEOs. Would you have different diagnostics for both audiences?
I have created different flavors of the same thing. So if I look at one example, I created a technology strategy scorecard, which was, broadly speaking, 20 questions across 4 categories. But the flavor that went out to financial services was completely different to the flavor that went out to retail startups, because their challenge points are completely different. Their stages of growth are completely different. But again, as we said in previous episodes, I led and I started with the one that I knew best, which was financial services. And when I decided to diversify, I modified the original scorecard to suit the new audience. I didn't create it from scratch. It probably took me a couple of hours to modify it versus half a day to create it in the first instance.
And that's probably, I guess leads on to the next question for you, really, is it's kind of important, isn't it, to keep an eye on these diagnostic tools to see how they're working. And the thing you create at the start isn't the thing that necessarily you end up with. So how do you, what's the kind of your guidance for someone, they think they're listening to this, they're thinking, I need one of those lead magnets. I might go and look at Score App and create some sort of diagnostic survey. How do you decide when the tool isn't working? What sort of things normally go wrong?
So I think there are many things that can go wrong and do go wrong. People, first and foremost, it's the same argument as creating a website, right? Creating it doesn't mean that people will go and look at it. And so creating a lead magnet doesn't automatically mean it's going to get downloaded. And so what I want people to think about is rather than spending their entire time on LinkedIn creating content that talks about being a fractional CMO, actually dedicate a healthy amount of time to promoting your lead magnet. That's the beginning part of your funnel. That's, you've got to get that attraction part right. And so you've got to get people in there so that you can nurture them. The purpose of the lead magnet is to get that audience into a place where you can reliably market to them, because you can't reliably market via LinkedIn. 20% of your audience see your content, which is an incredibly low number. In terms of monitoring the lead magnet itself, there are various ways you can do that. Score App keeps healthy metrics in terms of who's landing on the page, who's actually going into the Score App itself, and who's completing it. So you've got some metrics per day, week, and month. You will see a peak period, normally 24 to 48 hours after you've spoken about it somewhere publicly, and then you'll see a tail off. And it's how pronounced that tail off is that should tell you whether it's working or not. The other side is how many people actually go from the scorer into maybe your Calendly link and book a meeting. If you're getting 10 score responses and getting absolutely no Calendly bookings, then something in that magnet is not working effectively. You want to be hitting, 40%. It should be coming through to Calendly. And then I guess the final point on that is there's much more that you can do. Speaking to marketeers, it's obvious. It's a lead magnet. It's a fair exchange. We give you some free value. You give us your email address. We are going to use that. And whether that's because you run a newsletter or whether that's because you've got some form of email engine, be that something like ConvertKit or Beehive or MailChimp, actually use it. If somebody's downloaded your score app and downloaded a report, then set yourself up a nice little sequence of emails that comes after that. Thanks for completing my score app. By the way, these are 2 or 3 extra value pieces that you could have. Email number 5, I've given all the free value I can give you without a conversation. Let's have a chat. There's no obligation. And set that to be automatic. So, 2 days apart, 5 emails, 10-day sequence. And at the end of that, see how many people convert into meetings in the diary. So that's how I measure it. I measure it at execution level and at outcome.
And in terms of actually, once you've got the diagnostic offer built, you've tested it, you've ideated it, you've refined it, how do you actually go about presenting that offer? Because I know on LinkedIn there's various tools you can use to sort of make it quite prominent. The featured section is a good place to put that. But how else would you promote the diagnostic offer? Would it be through emails? Would it be through word of mouth? How would you suggest people engage with it?
Every way possible. There is no answer to that question that's wrong, other than doing nothing. Obvious ones: LinkedIn content, run a campaign, so 1 day a week, talk about your diagnostic offer. Talk about how it helps people, the types of results that you can get as a result of that, and the fact that it's free, and heavily promote it. On your LinkedIn profile, yes, use your featured items to promote that. And, we could generally do a whole series of episodes on LinkedIn alone, but at 10,000 feet, one featured item on your LinkedIn profile reduces friction. It stops people having to decide what they're going to do. So promote that there. And make sure that link is frictionless. So when you click on it, it goes straight to Score App. And the way you do that is you take the description out of the link and it goes straight through without a secondary click. So there's 2 bases. If you've already created a mailing list because you've had other diagnostic offers or you've brought mailing lists over with you, then by all means, refresh your mail list activity by promoting your diagnostic offer and see which of your existing contacts come back to life. And then other options, yes, your existing network. No, don't spam everybody in your network or 8.5 million connections that you've got until you've created a diagnostic offer. But hand select so many per week and send personal messages to them with that diagnostic offer in. And you can almost gamify it. When I put my stuff out there, I say, okay, I'm going to send it to 10 people a week. But it's not cookie cutter, it's not template. It is. Each one is, I know the person, I know the company, I've done my research, this may help them, let's have a chat. And then I keep an eye on those as they go through messaging. So lots of ways you can promote the magnet. The good ones, so ones like Score App, also can be SEO optimized to then promote themselves like Google as well. So there's lots you can do.
And is there too many diagnostic offers I can offer to the market? Would you suggest I keep the diagnostic offers to a minimum number, or if let's say 10 different offers, is that okay, or is it less is more?
It's such a great point. I know that everybody listening to this that's considering transitional into fractional will be sitting there thinking, like, there's so many different things that I can do, that I'm capable of doing. But the reality is that the more you go to market shouting about, the less people actually listen. And it's not about getting 10,000 eyes on your offers. It's about getting one set of eyes that are relevant. Because we're not in that marketplace when we're selling $49 ebooks. We're in the marketplace where we're selling services that can sustain us quite comfortably on 2 clients. So for me, I don't advocate going to market with multiple offers in parallel. There's nothing wrong with having them in your pocket, but I would always prioritize one ICP and one niche with one offer at a time. And I would suggest that a 3-month run on that particular offer is a good timetable to benchmark whether it's working or not. And if you're thinking about how long do you run a niche before you know that it's working or it's not working, what I can say quite categorically is that it takes 6 months to become established in any marketplace. Yeah, if I look back at my histories, when I started, the most recent one was when I started coaching practice. It took me 6 months. I've talked about coaching consistently before people started going, if somebody says fractional and coaching, they probably need to stick to that. That was 6 months of dedicated effort. If you, midway through that process, start talking about something else, half your audience zone out and wander off. And so you really have to be super specific. Now, just to close that point off, there are lots of occasions where a client leans into that conversation and the current offer doesn't work for them. It's not right for them. But they've already lent in, so that means that I can present to them, I can pitch to them a different offer, a flavour of the same offer if necessary. But it's just not the one that's public. It's not the big one that I'm putting all of my efforts into. So you can have multiple, but just focus on talking about one.
Brilliant advice there. I think that's probably a good place to close this podcast off, Dan. So again, thank you again for your expert insights. I hope our listeners have found everything you said hugely useful and valuable, and they can take that into the next part of their marketing career should they choose to go the fractional route. To give you a heads up, in our next episode, we'll be joined again by Dan, and we'll be discussing how senior marketers set themselves apart as a fractional leader and how to define and communicate your unique value proposition to clients. There's going to be more people coming to market, position themselves as fractional marketers. So you need to differentiate yourself there. So look out for that. Dan, thank you again. I very much look forward to your company on the next episode. Have a good one.
Cheers, Dole.